They told me to take the fall for $80K missing because I was new. HR called it a loyalty test. I signed the statement, then BCC'd the auditor every log proving it was my manager. So when the CFO pointed at me, I just pulled out the receipts. When the CFO's voice cracked through the conference room speakerphone, my heart didn't even race. I'd been expecting it. "Looks like all signs point to you," he said. "Money trail stops at your credentials." The manager sitting across from me, Tony, gave this sympathetic half-smile, the kind that's supposed to look sorry but lands somewhere between condescending and relieved. He'd told me a few hours earlier that sometimes you've got to take one for the team. His exact words, "You're new, Jess. It'll be easier for you to bounce back than for me. I've got a family, a mortgage, you don't want to screw over everyone because of a misunderstanding, right?" Then HR chimed in. They called it a test of loyalty. A test. As if being coerced into signing a false statement admitting I mishandled $80,000 was a fun little corporate trust exercise. They even handed me the statement, already printed, with my name typed neatly at the top. All I had to do was sign, so I did, with a smile, because by that point I had already sent a quiet email. BCC'd, not forwarded. Every internal transfer, every Slack message Tony had sent telling me to process this quick. Every password reset request that originated from his laptop after hours, all zipped into one folder labeled training receipt zip, sent straight to the external auditors, and the company's compliance attorney, and one more address Tony didn't know existed, my personal encrypted drive. So when the CFO pointed at me during the meeting and said, "Jess, this is your chance to be honest," I just nodded. I looked Tony right in the eye and said, "Of course, I'll tell them everything." His smile froze. He didn't realize I meant literally everything. And when the investigation team started calling employees into private interviews one by one, HR's smug little test of loyalty started looking a lot more like a firing squad. Because that test, it wasn't mine anymore. It was his, and he was about to fail it. When I first started at Reynolds Financial Consulting in Dallas, I honestly thought I'd landed my dream job. I was 28, finally working in corporate finance after years of scraping, by doing bookkeeping for small construction firms. Tony, my direct manager, was the one who'd hired me. He was slick, the kind of guy who wore polished brown shoes, used words like synergy, and laughed just loud enough to sound powerful. On my first day, he called me kiddo and told everyone I was sharp, quick, and humble. That word, humble, became a warning I didn't recognize yet. For the first few weeks, he treated me like his star recruit. He'd drop by my desk, tap the side of my monitor, and say, "You're a natural, Jess. I knew it." He'd ask me to handle small fund transfers between client accounts, then slowly increase the amounts. "Just housekeeping stuff," he said. "You'll get used to it." And I did. Until one Friday night, he sent me a Slack message at 9:47 p.m. "Hey, can you process this one-time adjustment for Kinston Holdings? Need it done before morning." It was $15,000. He gave me a new routing code and said, "It's part of our internal reserve fund." I didn't think twice. I just executed it, logged it like always. But 2 weeks later, another transfer came through, same pattern, same vague explanation. And then another. Eventually, I started asking questions. He brushed me off. "We're reallocating short-term capital, Jess. Stop worrying. You're overthinking everything." I started noticing small things, his sudden weekend trips, his upgraded watch, the way he'd walk out of meetings when compliance officers joined. Then one morning, I found an open email thread on the shared computer in the break room. It wasn't mine, it was his. The subject line read, "Funds rerouted, confirm before audit." My stomach dropped. Attached was a spreadsheet, client transfers labeled under training account, test fund, adjustments, all with my user ID listed as the executor. That's when I realized he'd been setting me up from the start. Every training transfer was a cover. Every internal adjustment came from my login under his direction. When I confronted him about it that afternoon, he didn't flinch. He just leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "You're ambitious, Jess, but you don't understand how this world works. Everyone takes a little extra. Don't be naive." He said it so calmly, like it was some universal truth I was too inexperienced to grasp. By Monday, HR had called me in. "There's been a discrepancy," they said. "Your name is on some irregular transfers." Tony was in the room. He looked concerned, played the mentor role perfectly. Told them he'd coach me through this. That's when I understood. I wasn't just being framed, I was the exit plan. And when he whispered, "Just take the fall quietly, I'll make it up to you later," I knew exactly what I needed to do. I just smiled and started planning. After that meeting, everything shifted. HR stopped making eye contact with me. Tony stopped calling me kiddo. The friendly emails turned into curt one-liners. "Need this handled ASAP." By the end of that week, the whispers started. You can feel it when the air around you changes, when coworkers stop laughing near your desk, when your lunch invitations mysteriously disappear. I was radioactive, and Tony made sure of it. He started planting seeds. He'd walk past my cubicle with the CFO, shake his head slightly, whisper something under his breath. I'd hear fragments, "rookie mistake," "protocol breach," and once when he didn't realize I was in the hall, I caught, "She's smart but sloppy, I'll clean it up." That line stuck with me. "I'll clean it up." Like I was a stain on his spotless career. Around that time, it froze my admin privileges. I couldn't access client folders, couldn't even view the transfer logs I'd been compiling for months. Luckily, I'd been smarter than Tony realized. Every night for 2 weeks before that, I'd been exporting logs and backing them up on my encrypted drive. Timestamps, approvals, VPN locations, all of it. But the real punch in the gut came when HR called me in again. "We've decided to initiate a formal review," they said. "We'll need your written statement admitting to the errors so we can close the issue quickly." They slid the printed confession across the table. My name was already typed in. The first line read, "I take full responsibility for the mismanagement and unauthorized movement of internal funds." I stared at it, then at Tony. He was sitting beside me, hands clasped like a disappointed parent. He said softly, "This is the smart move, Jess. It'll look better if you take accountability. Everyone makes mistakes." Then HR added the line that sealed it. "Consider this a test of loyalty. Tony's standing up for you. Don't make him regret it." I remember laughing, actually laughing, because in that moment it became crystal clear they didn't see me as a person. I was a problem to be absorbed, a name to file under resolved. So I signed it, smiled, even thanked them. But that night I didn't go home. I went back to the office after hours, badge still active, lights low, the cleaning crew already gone. I copied every last email, every Slack message, every transfer approval Tony had sent. And when I was done, I drafted an email titled, "Internal Concern, Possible Falsified Financial Activity." I attached everything. Then BCC'd the external audit team, the compliance attorney, and a private investigator whose contact info I found on a financial whistleblower forum. When I hit send, my hands were steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. 2 days later, the audit committee arrived unannounced. And Tony, the man who had built his whole persona on control, started to crack. He avoided eye contact. His smile went crooked. His office door stayed shut. He had no idea his loyal rookie had just turned his setup into a ticking bomb. The morning the auditors showed up, the office felt wrong. Too quiet. No music, no laughter, just the faint sound of shoes on tile and low voices in conference rooms. Tony came in late, 10:15 a.m., coffee in hand, fake confidence in his step. But his face was pale and his tie was crooked. I watched him through the glass wall of his office as 2 compliance officers walked in behind him, unannounced. They closed the door. I didn't hear much, but I saw his expression change. The smug, bored look faded, replaced by something sharp and cornered. His jaw flexed. He started talking fast, gesturing, pointing toward my desk. Classic move, redirect. But it wasn't working this time. The auditors had their own copies of the documents I'd sent. They had his login logs, his timestamps, even screenshots of his late-night transfers. By noon, HR was panicking. The same woman who'd called my confession a test of loyalty now avoided looking at me altogether. The CFO locked himself in a conference call. Everyone knew something big was unraveling, but no one said a word. At 2:37 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from internal audit, urgent, interview scheduled. When I walked into the conference room, there were 3 people waiting, the CFO, a senior auditor, and the compliance attorney. Tony was already there. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled like he hadn't slept. "Jessica," the auditor said, Thank you for meeting with us. We just have a few questions. I nodded. Tony wouldn't look at me. They asked about the transfers, the passwords, the late-night adjustments. I didn't even hesitate. I told them everything, step by step, including how Tony instructed me to execute the transactions and told me to label them under training accounts. The CFO frowned. Do you have proof of these instructions? I smiled. I sent everything to the audit inbox before you called me in. Tony's head snapped up. He looked at me like I'd just stabbed him, and in a way I had. The auditor opened his laptop, scrolled, then froze. He whispered something to the compliance attorney. She nodded slowly. Then she turned to Tony. Mr. DeLuca, can you explain why these transfers originated from your IP address after hours? He stammered. That's impossible. I wasn't even logged in, but they weren't listening anymore. They had the evidence. The room went silent, except for the faint clicking of the auditor's keyboard. Finally, the CFO stood up. Tony, I think we're done here. Security will escort you out. Tony's mouth opened and closed like he was drowning. He turned to me, eyes wild. You set me up, he hissed. I leaned back in my chair. No, you set yourself up. I just sent the receipts. As security led him away, HR poked her head in. She looked terrified. The CFO said, We'll need to review your involvement too, Diane. Her face went white. Because the next surprise, the one nobody saw coming, was that she wasn't innocent either. After Tony was escorted out, the office turned into a morgue. HR looked like they'd been hit by a truck. The CFO spent the rest of the day pacing the hallway on the phone with legal, muttering words like exposure, federal compliance, and liability. But me, I sat there at my desk, typing quietly, pretending to work, while I planned the next move. Because I knew the fallout wasn't over, not even close. By the next morning, HR called me back in. Same sterile conference room, same woman, Diane, sitting across from me. She looked smaller now. Fragile, even. Jessica, she said carefully, we've spoken with the auditors. They've confirmed your cooperation was instrumental. We appreciate that. Her tone made it sound like she was choking on the words. I just nodded. I'm glad to help. Then she leaned forward, voice lower. But you understand, this situation reflects poorly on all of us. The board will need someone to assume internal responsibility. Optics matter. It might be best if you step away quietly just for a while. There it was again. That same corporate poison. Step away quietly. Translation, take the fall anyway, just in a softer way. They couldn't fire me, not with everything I'd exposed, but they wanted me gone before the press got wind of it. I kept my face calm. Inside, though, I felt something snap. Because now I knew what Tony meant when he said, everyone takes a little extra. He hadn't been talking about money. He meant power, protection, the safety that comes from being inside the circle, the one that chews people like me up when it needs a scapegoat. So that night, I started my own paper trail. I pulled up every email, every HR memo, every Slack message where Diane had told me to just sign it or trust Tony. I drafted a timeline. Every decision they made, every cover-up attempt, every compliance policy they violated. Then I uploaded it to an encrypted folder labeled Liability Overview HR Oversight. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I scheduled it, a delayed email blast, set to go to the auditors, the legal department, and the board if I didn't cancel it within 7 days. Just in case they tried to encourage me to leave again. And then I started thinking bigger. Tony might have been the one moving money, but Diane was the one who let him. She'd signed off on his department audits without question. If I could trace the approval chain far enough, maybe I'd find proof that she knew that the whole department had been feeding off this system for years. I stayed up late that night, piecing everything together like a puzzle. Timestamp by timestamp, name by name. And at around 3:40 a.m., when my eyes were burning and the city outside was quiet, I found it, an archived email from 2 years earlier, hidden deep in the shared HR backup drive. It was from Diane to Tony. Subject line, Ray, training transfers, keep it under 100K to avoid red flags. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just Tony. It was both of them, and they'd been running this scam long before I was ever hired. Finding that old email should have felt like victory, proof that Diane wasn't just complicit, she was in on it. But as I dug deeper into the HR archives, something didn't add up. The approval chain on the transfers didn't stop with her. It went higher. I followed the digital breadcrumbs through signatures and metadata, all the way up to the CFO himself, Greg Havorson, the same man who'd sat across from me in that audit meeting, pretending to be the voice of justice. One of the attached files in that archived email was a memo from him, marked internal use only. It detailed how departmental incentives could be reallocated temporarily to improve quarterly liquidity optics. That's corporate speak for, "We're going to cook the books, just don't call it that." And Tony, he was just the errand boy. Diane was the middle layer. Greg was the one cashing the real chips. They'd built the whole thing like a pyramid. Tony handled the dirty transfers, Diane rubber-stamped them, and Greg cleaned it all up before the numbers hit the board reports. I was just the new name added to the bottom of the pyramid, the disposable layer when it started to wobble. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why HR had pushed me so hard to take responsibility. Why Greg had been so calm when Tony was escorted out. Why the audit felt controlled. He wasn't surprised by the corruption, he was managing it. That realization hit me so hard I almost laughed. They'd set Tony up, too. The moment things got risky, Greg used the external audit as a weapon to clean house, knowing the blame would stop with the most obvious target, the mid-level manager with dirty hands. And if I hadn't sent those BCC'd emails, if I hadn't fought back, I'd have gone down with Tony. Quietly, efficiently. That's when my anger stopped being about me. It became about all the other Jessicas who'd been hired, trained, and sacrificed in that office before me. I stopped sleeping. I started building a timeline, not just of what I'd seen, but of the entire scheme. Dates, transfers, memos, Slack threads, email headers, everything. And when I was done, I had something no one else in that company had, the full story. Tony had stolen money. Diane had covered it. But Greg had built the system that made it all possible. And he was still there, smiling, running meetings, acting like the hero who'd rooted out corruption. I couldn't let that stand. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in months, an old coworker from my bookkeeping days who now worked as a junior investigator for the Dallas office of the SEC. I didn't send her everything, just one file, the memo with Greg's name. She called me 20 minutes later. "Jess," she said quietly, "where did you get this?" I told her the truth. Her reply was just 5 words. "Don't tell anyone you called me." That's when I knew this was going way beyond office politics. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was exposure. The SEC investigator, her name was Lauren, called me again 2 days later. I could tell by her tone that she'd been sitting on something big. "Jess," she said, "I need you to understand this isn't just about embezzlement. What your CFO did, what he built, it's part of a much bigger pattern." She told me they'd been quietly looking into Reynolds' financial for months. Not because of missing money, but because of client laundering activity. Shell companies, false ledgers, money bouncing through training accounts across multiple states. My transfers were just small ripples in a much deeper pool. Greg had created an internal system that let him wash client cash, and he used low-level employees, like me and Tony, as disposable access points. He'd intentionally train new hires to process small, suspicious transactions under vague instructions. Then, when anything got flagged, he'd blame the error on rookie incompetence and purge whoever touched it. Diane's job in HR was to keep it quiet. Every test of loyalty, every confession, every quiet exit was part of a control mechanism, a cleanup routine disguised as HR protocol. Tony hadn't been the first manager to go down. He was just the first one to realize he'd been played. Lauren told me something else that made my stomach twist, a detail so cold it barely felt human. Greg had an internal nickname for people like me. In one of his deleted Slack messages, recovered by the audit software, he referred to entry-level staff handling transfer requests as sinkholes. "Use a sinkhole for trial runs. Easier to bury if it leaks." That was me. That was my role from the very beginning, to absorb suspicion, take the blame, and disappear quietly once the system reset. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a disposable hole to dump risk into. And it wasn't just me. Lauren told me there'd been at least 4 others before me, all under 30, all new, all who had quietly left after accounting errors. One of them had even filed a wrongful termination suit that mysteriously vanished after a settlement. Greg had been doing this for years. It hit me then, Tony wasn't the true villain. He was a product of Greg's machine. Diane was, too. They were desperate, feeding off whatever scraps of safety he gave them. Greg was the one who'd turned greed into a system. And when the heat came down on Tony, Greg had triggered the same cleanup protocol: frame, isolate, purge, replace. Except this time, his sinkhole, me, had refused to disappear. Lauren's voice dropped low. Jess, we're moving fast, but once we open this formally, you'll be exposed. He'll know it came from inside. I didn't even hesitate. I'm not hiding anymore, I said. Just tell me what to do. She paused, then said something I'll never forget. Then make him think you're gone. Let him believe he won. That night, I drafted my resignation letter. Short, professional, effective immediately. Then I set my final play in motion. I submitted my resignation at 9:04 a.m. on a Thursday. No fanfare, no drama, just a polite email to HR. Thank you for the opportunity. I've decided to move on. Diane replied within 6 minutes. We wish you the best, Jess. Thank you for your professionalism. Of course she did. To her, this was the cleanup complete, another sinkhole drained. Greg CC'd the thread with a quick good luck in your future endeavors. They thought it was over. It wasn't, because by then, I'd already given Lauren the green light. The SEC had everything. The full trail, the audit logs, the email metadata, the sinkhole Slack messages, and the internal memo signed by Greg. My encrypted drive was officially part of the investigation record. And my scheduled email, the one I'd set up in case they tried to silence me, I didn't cancel it. I updated it. At 11:45 a.m., it automatically blasted out to the entire board of directors, the company's law firm, and the press inboxes of 2 local financial news outlets. Subject line: Internal transfers, supporting evidence for pending SEC review. Attachments: 47 files, every single one naming Greg Havorson. The news broke within 48 hours. Dallas finance firm under federal investigation for internal laundering scheme. CFO and HR director placed on leave pending inquiry. Whistleblower triggers major compliance audit at Reynolds Financial. The office went into chaos. Greg's name was plastered across industry newsletters. Diane's LinkedIn profile vanished overnight. Tony's lawyer released a statement claiming he'd acted under direction from senior management. He wasn't wrong. I stayed quiet. No interviews, no online posts, just silence. I watched from a small apartment downtown as the company's reputation crumbled. 2 weeks later, Lauren called. They're indicting him, she said simply. Wire fraud, falsified records, internal conspiracy. The evidence you kept, those backups, were what sealed it. She paused. You did good, Jess. You stopped something that could have kept going for years. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, looking out the window at the city lights, realizing how much of myself I'd lost in the process. The rage that had driven me for months was gone, replaced by something quieter, not peace exactly, but something close. Before we hung up, she added, There's talk of restitution. You might be entitled to whistleblower protection compensation. I told her I didn't care about the money. I just wanted my name clean. A month later, Reynolds Financial quietly rebranded. New logo, new slogan. Integrity in every transaction. Yeah, sure. I got a job with a smaller firm, one that actually runs clean books. My new boss asked in the interview why I'd left Reynolds. I smiled and said, bad management. He laughed. Don't we all have that story? Not like mine, I thought. But I just nodded, took the offer, and started fresh. Some nights I still replay that first meeting, Tony's fake sympathy, HR's smirk, the way Greg pretended to be my ally. And every time I do, I remind myself of one simple truth. If they test your loyalty to see how much you'll take, make sure the only thing they get from you is evidence.